Hey gang, what is going on? Welcome back once again to the Square Roundtable right here on Byte, the show where we break down one specific topic that is so important that it just cannot fit into the podcast. So it is right here on YouTube. You see here three gentlemen, and if you look up above, as always, there is the title. And we've talked about main eventers. We've talked about who can be the main event. But the fact of the matter is, do we always need to have a main event caliber talent in order to be declared successful? Obviously, I'm talking here from a wrestling fan standpoint. Definitely make sure if you have any suggestions for a Square Roundtable topic to drop those in the comment section. So with that being said, guys, when we talk about success in wrestling, because we're going to talk about this topic first, from a wrestling fan standpoint, what do you declare successful in wrestling?
The thing I look to most is longevity, more than like title reigns and impact, or however you want to define impact. It's how long was this guy's career? Was he around for and for the actual career itself? Like, was he in WWE most of his career? Did he like have a couple of dark years where he maybe went on to another company? And basically longevity is the thing I factor highest on my list.
I think kind of taking it a step further, I think kind of two factors have to kind of be in a balance with each other, and that is A, longevity, and B, relevance. So it doesn't matter if you're around for 20 years if you're just, at the bottom of the card your whole career. I think you have to balance that with, okay, if you're around for 5 years, but you were all the way up here versus around 10 years all the way up here, it's kind of like a sliding scale of balance. And, obviously what you do during that time is very important.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's a matter of what did you do during that time that makes you memorable? I guess an example, because we're talking about mid-carders for the most part, is somebody like Rikishi. Rikishi is a Hall of Famer, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't really remember him for a ton of feuds. We can talk about, the whole I did it for The Rock thing. But when you think of Rikishi, you immediately recognize the moveset, his mannerisms, his music, his moves, and it's somebody that if they come back today, you're like, yes, that guy. And I don't think a lot of wrestlers could pull that off. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, are you talking about Rikishi or in general?
No, Rikishi in this case. Like, if Rikishi showed up next week, would you be like, yeah, Rikishi, stinkface?
I wouldn't so much be marking out, but it's like I would know what to expect out of Rikishi coming down.
Rikishi, if nothing else, is memorable. Like, he's one of the standout people from the Attitude Era.
Yeah. And another good example, Dudley Boys. Let's break it down, because we're talking about the mid-card primarily, but these are two guys that are highly decorated in wrestling as a whole. They were never a main event guy. We can talk about Bubba Ray as Bully Ray in TNA, but let's keep it to WWE for the sake of this conversation here. When you see them, when you have them come back, people are like, once again, brand, recognition. They know what these guys are all about, but they were never a champion, and a singles big-time champion. So are you guys a fan of that guy that doesn't reach the main event? We're not talking John Cena. We're not talking Randy. Maybe somebody like Mr. Perfect is, I guess, another good example. Did you guys enjoy those type of wrestlers growing up?
Well, see, the thing is, I feel like nowadays you definitely have to be considered successful. I think it is more important to be in the main event or have a taste of the main event, because I think that directly relates to the credibility of the mid-card titles. Because, you can look at guys like Razor Ramon and Mr. Perfect and Owen Hart, and these guys are all like surefire Hall of Famers because the mid-card titles and the stuff they did was really important back then, almost as important as the main event, because a lot of those mid-card title guys also became main eventers, so even the guys that didn't make it look great because of that. But nowadays, with the Intercontinental title and US title in question a lot of times, that doesn't mean as much. So a lot of these mid-carder guys, if they never reach the top, they seem far less relevant than those guys did.
But is that a sign of the times, or is that just our expectation as wrestling fans?
Because I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, sure enough. Because I don't know, it's hard to really say, like, somebody like Ryback or R-Truth can be failures, quote, failures, because they never reached the top of the card. But like, I think Ryback is fine. I think he's having a great career for Ryback right now. I wouldn't consider it him having a negative thing, even though he's pretty far down the card.
Here's an odd example. I think in a lot of movies, people's favorite character isn't necessarily the protagonist, it's the sidekick. But in movies, you don't think to yourself, oh, the sidekick should be the top, should be the protagonist. You're super happy about that. In wrestling, if you like somebody, Cesaro, Dolph Ziggler, the list can go on and on, you feel the necessity, the obligation. It's almost like it's a right for them to be at the main event, because otherwise it's like, no, man, he's going for the IC title, he's going for the US title, he's a failure. So it's interesting because we hope for everybody to almost be in the main event scene. So we're not saying like a fatal four-way. People want to see like a 20-man match for the title. So do you think maybe expectation really does factor in for you guys? I'm not talking generally. I want to get your feedback, starting with you, Rhino.
Well, because I think the perception of the mid-card has vastly changed from, 10, 15 years ago. There's more wrestling, more people become champion now because there's just more wrestling. So, we've seen guys like Jack Swagger and Dolph Ziggler win world titles. So now it's like, if they can win world titles, then, who's Ryback if he doesn't win the WWE title? You know what I mean? It means a lot less. Whereas, Mr. Perfect just being Intercontinental Champion really meant something back then. But now, 15 years ago, 15 years from now, are we going to put Ryback in the same conversation as Mr. Perfect or somebody like that? Just on booking alone, not wrestling ability or charisma or anything like that. I still think it's just the whole perception of the times. They're going to seem miles apart, even if they were kind of lingering in the same spot.
That's I'm starting to see where you're coming from, Ryan, and that is an interesting point. And I'm wondering if that's just something that there's going to be this weird hump in the overall history of wrestling just because there were two main titles at the time instead of the one. So people like Jack Swagger, like Dolph Ziggler, like Alberto Del Rio even got that opportunity to be champion, and that's why they're perceived, now that they've moved back to one title, that's why they're being perceived as less. Like there was more room for in those top feuds, so more guys could be in there. And now that it's more like throttled off, that room just doesn't exist anymore.
I think another word you can use to describe this is hunger. Case in point, think back to the Attitude Era. The first two guys you think about are Austin and Rock, but then not too soon after, you think about the TLC matches, and when you hear the documentaries, the podcast, the reason that we had matches like that is because the guys themselves, Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian, Hardys, straight up said, we know we cannot top those guys in terms of recognition, just the people's perception that they are the main event and we are not. So we are going to try and steal the show so that then they have to try and one-up us. And that doesn't really seem to happen now very much, at least for me. So when I think of somebody like Kevin Owens, I don't want Kevin Owens to be WWE World Heavyweight Champion, not because I don't like him, but I would prefer him to be so good that the WWE Champion would almost like to sort of downgrade just to be able to feud with Kevin Owens. But it seems like in today's wrestling, that is just not a thing. So historically, the other guys have always been on the second tier, but they found a creative way to get around that. And now that we have not nearly as many backstage segments, a lot of these things that were in the Attitude Era that made you care about Edge and Christian, you think of kazoos and all of that. Can you really do a comparison about somebody like that when it comes to their character right now? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think when we're trying to say, can a mid-carder be considered successful? Can a mid-carder get in the Hall of Fame? Yes, but it's also a direct result of the mid-card, the status, the health of the mid-card as a whole. You know what I mean? If you're the one talented guy in a sea of crap that is the mid-card, then you're not going to look that great, So that's why it's like the one thing we have in WWE is, if you get to the top, then, hey, we can say you made it.
True. Definitely. Question. Who would you say is your favorite mid-card wrestler currently? Technically, Kevin Owens is in that list. I'm just going to point out, because I know sometimes our expectations alone keep us from saying certain guys, because you're like, he's almost up there, but technically he's not. I'm just going to say, for me, it is Kevin Owens.
Tough.
Yeah, but okay, so what would you say it's tough? Like, is it because a large pool of talent? Is it because you don't think there's enough mid-card recognition? What do you have problems, Keith? I can help you out.
Oh, well,
we can do this together.
Well, thank you so much. We'll get through it together. I don't know. Like you said, it's just a matter of expectation versus reality. Like, do you see that guy as a mid-card talent? Do you think it's a cop-out answer, even no offense to yours, to say Kevin Owens? Because that's a guy that you know is going to reach the top at some point. But I guess because he's not there yet, that's really just all speculation. So, yeah.
Okay, so let me cut both of you off here and then ask a different question. Yes or no, you're not allowed to elaborate at all.
Okay.
When you think of the word mid-card, do you immediately think less for you? Less enjoyment for you, regardless of if you like them or not?
We're not allowed to elaborate?
Nope.
My answer is no.
My answer is also no.
Okay. So... Then yeah, I guess you gotta elaborate now.
Well, because I mean, Raw as a show is not just one segment, two segment, and if you had those top guys in every single segment, it would be a very boring show. You would probably stop watching it completely. So, I think it's very difficult to rank people on where they are in the card, opposed to how enjoyable the segments they are in actually are. So if a guy's low on the card, like let's say we have a segment between Fandango and Heath Slater, and it's entertaining, it's still going to be entertaining. It's still going to be a good segment. It doesn't matter where they are on the card. So that outweighs card ranking for me.
Yeah, because we can sort of look at like, I'm trying to figure out where I'm losing my train of thought for a second. But okay, so we can look at a segment that's in the mid card and we can just enjoy it for what it is.
Yes.
And then there's always just that, so it does, because it's in the mid card, it doesn't take away from the enjoyment, but there's that second part of our brain as like the smart wrestling fan. It's like we can look at this mid card segment and be like, yes, I love this, but there's always that second drive where you're like, no, but they should be here. Even though we still enjoy it here, we're like, no, you need to be here because we enjoyed so much, you need to be here. But then sometimes they get there and it's not as good. But that's another story.
I think
and
that's
then I also
a good
came
thing.
to mind though, I think my favorite mid-card act, if this counts, is The New Day. So, like, Big E would probably be my favorite mid-card wrestler at the present moment.
Mm-hmm. It's a weird answer, but now that I think about it, I think mine is Rusev. Just because I think... I love Rusev. He's had a couple of bumps in the road recently, but I still think that he is a great talent that can do a lot of things. So, as far as the mid-card goes, I have to say Rusev.
Last subtopic. Do you guys immediately associate a mid-card division with a title? The best example, John Cena as U.S. champion. He was technically not the main event champion of the company, but a lot of people's perceptions, going back to that word, was maybe different.
Not immediately, and I honestly think that's a good thing. The thing that I kind of like about the mid-card is they can go outside of just, hey, this is two dudes feuding for a title. You can make it about other things. Like back in the day, there was a mid-card feud about Kane getting a cup of coffee spilt on him by Chris Jericho, and they had like a 3-week program about that. That's awesome when wrestling does that. So I don't, usually that's where it ends up, and at the end of the day, that's because that's what wrestling is, but I like it better when it's not associated with a championship.
Yeah, I agree with Keith. I like it better when it isn't always about the title. And recently we've gotten a couple storylines here and there where it isn't. But for like the last maybe 5 or 6
We've
years,
grown accustomed to it.
the majority, yeah, exactly. That's been ingrained that the majority of the mid-card feuds were just exclusively for the title. There was no other heat or animosity between the guys aside from the fact that, hey, you have the title and I want to challenge you for it. And we saw a lot of that for a very long time. And if it wasn't about that, it might be a storyline that you're just like, oh my God, will they please end this? Which, I mean, we did recently see something
got
like
one of
that.
those in recent
Yeah, but
history.
we also got something great like The Miz and, Mizdow, which wasn't always about the title until they just completely ran that off a cliff. But it was great for a little while.
Yeah.
True.
And in my case, I got to say, yeah, I wish almost that there was almost no mid-card title because it just doesn't make sense. In today's wrestling, the moment Rey Mysterio became champion, nothing against Rey at all, but don't call it the heavyweight title. We know it's not. Come on, most of these guys do not qualify as heavyweights. So then if the main title is not a heavyweight title, then what's the IC title? Like, what is the US title? It makes no sense at all.
Well, that's why
Or
I
at
like
least
the
have
term.
one title.
I like the term world champion instead of like heavyweight
Yeah.
champion, because even that still works. Like, you are the champion of the world. Well, now you're the intercontinental champion. Now you're the United States champion. It's almost like the top of the the top title, and then it kind of trickles down into different sectors.
If
until you
they
get hardcore.
scrapped one title, would you feel better about it?
Probably.
Like, US is
Partially.
gone.
Partially. I think it's a matter of you've built up the other title so much, and everybody in every interview says, well, the main goal is to main event WrestleMania, that it's very rare that you hear, well, my main goal in wrestling is to be the greatest IC champion. We've had things like when Cody Rhodes, the reason we have the wide strap title is because he wanted to bring back prestige into it. And I really like that, but then it just sort of faded away. Now the title looks great. It's on Kevin Owens as of this video's recording, but then I wish they could do a lot more with it. But personally, mid-card for me, I prefer it more without any titles. Just quick example here. I'm a huge Shane McMahon advocate. You guys very much know that. Somebody like Kane versus Shane involved no titles. One of my favorite feuds because it was outrageous, it was ridiculous, it was personal, and because there was no title involved, there was no thing of like, oh, I'm gonna win this over you. No, it's like, I want to beat you. Like, that is the whole purpose of the feud. That if there was a title involved, that is completely secondary. And that is what I think that the mid-card has a lot of flexibility when it comes to their feuds. So maybe another topic later on that we could have is flexibility in mid-card feuds, because I do think that they have a little bit more flexibility than the main event. But for those watching, definitely drop your comments about this topic. Do you prefer mid-card? Do you prefer main event? We didn't talk about lower card because we think that's on a whole different level. But yeah, if you like this video, definitely give us a like. And if you really like Ryan's glasses or his hoodie or his microphone, it's right there. Look at that door. It's beautiful. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out the podcast. Available every single Tuesday. We talk about Raw, pay-per-views, a ton of cool stuff. So until next time, this is going to be an ongoing conversation because the mid-card keeps ever-changing, especially with the inclusion of NXT and guys like Neville and so on and so forth. So until next time, thank you for watching, and we will be back with tons more right here on Byte That.